Hey, hey. Welcome to another episode of This Shit's Hard podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Biscuiti.
And I'm Jen, aka Rumblebum. Thank you for joining us.
Underneath? That's what she said, underneath your tongue.
And we're live.
Great. Welcome to another episode of This Shit's Hard. This shit is about to get real hard.
Not with Devin.
Because we're talking about sex, baby, with Dr. Sex Sam. Welcome back to the studio, Dr. Sam.
Thank you for having me again, and I so appreciate you having me as a permanent guest on the series.
You are our only permanent guest with our only series because sex is important to talk about.
Definitely.
And we were just talking about blowjobs. BTS.
Yeah.
Poor Devin.
Poor Devin.
He's enjoying it.
If you've been following along with us, our loyal listeners, you know that typically our producer Devin gives himself a microphone. However, today he's just gonna let the the singular expert in the room, and Rumble and I speak. He wants nothing to do with this, other than making sure we're.
Although we might need your opinion on some things. I mean, you can chime in. But if we need a man's opinion, we can be like, "What say you? What say you, Devin?"
He's shaking his head.
So, in continuation with our sex series by Dr. Sam, today is all about kinks. Let's get kinky.
Let's get kinky.
Let's get
A
kinky.
touchy subject for a lot of people. I feel like it's still very
Taboo.
Like not a lot of people are just come out and are like, "Hey, what's your kink?" I feel like it's getting a little bit more normalized. I see now like Instagram posts on it and things like that. So
Yeah, so thankfully the world is getting a little bit more open about all of these types of conversations, but you know, there are still layers within sex that people still feel nervous talking about. And, you know, there's a lot of misconceptions about kink that people believe in. And so that's why it feels a little bit scary to talk about kink or to even admit that there's kinky interests or, you know, because some of this stuff can look a little bit dangerous and some of the stuff can look a little bit unsafe. But that's not what kinky people do. There's like a whole process that they follow.
But also, let's take a step back, because when you hear kink, I mean, I Googled it just to be like, what constitutes being kinky?
Yeah, so to me, kink involves different types of play surrounding like things that are out of the norm or, you know, things that people play around with, like power dynamics or different types of objects. And they can have sex, but it also doesn't have to be sex. It's just, I think kink equals play.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really big learning for me too, because in my cursory research leading up to today, I was surprised to learn that it doesn't mean a sexual act.
Right. Yeah. And it's just adding, to me, it's adding a sense of play, which then lowers the stakes down a little bit. And it allows people to just kind of be who they are and exploring different pleasure sensations, different power dynamics, and adding, like enhancing the experience. And then you can have sex if you want, and then at the same time, you don't have to.
Mm-hmm. Where do you want to go from here?
I'm just taking it all in my brain, just trying to think of, well, we asked questions from our viewers in our DMs, said, hey, shout out, give us your questions, and we will pass them over to the expert, certainly not us. Nicole and I are not experts in kink, but we do not have doctor in our title. We do not have doctor, and we are trying to learn ourselves to make it less taboo, even for myself, because, you know, I don't even know how much that encompasses, you know, when you say the word kink, kinky, like I know probably maybe 10% of what that actually means. So I guess we can start with maybe a couple of the questions.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So you have the questions in front of you, whatever I think. If not, I have them.
I can pull them up. Would you like me to?
I have the picture that you guys.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So whatever one you want to start with that you think would be like more like appeal to maybe like more of the masses.
Yeah.
Per se.
So there was a question. I'm going to start with the question about how to tell someone about kink.
Yeah, that's a good one.
How to have the conversation with your partner.
Right.
Okay.
So this question is geared towards people who are exploring kink and figuring out what their interests are, or people who
Okay,
are
can I
trying
stop
to
you right there? Sorry. How do you start, just to back that up a little bit, you said it, people who are exploring that are finding what they like. How do you even like start
Yeah, let's back up there and
to
do that.
find what you like?
Great question.
Yeah, so to me, I think exploring on your own has a lot of power, because then you can build the confidence in having, hey, like this really feels interesting to me, or oh, hey, like I'm really curious about this. And then you can translate that to your partner or partners, depending on how many partners you have, and have it will feel different, you know, like, because having a partner feels different than just exploring on your own. But solo play is really a great space to explore your interests. So you can explore whether it's like looking at images or reading those sexy books, you know, like a lot of those sexy books are very kinky.
Shout out Holly.
Shout out Holly.
Shout out
She
Holly.
was reading all her sexy books.
In
Yeah.
Egypt.
Or audio stories. There's a couple of like podcasts and apps that have like the audio book type things, or, you know, like even exploring by asking people about their kinks. Like there's a lot of meetups and things like that for people in the kinky community as well.
What? This is a whole community.
Yeah.
Where we can have meetups. Interesting.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
There is a whole community, and it's really a great place because you can explore interests, and then you can also learn the process in order to have safer experiences. Because a lot about kink is about setting the scene, which is consent, making sure everybody is aware and consenting, making sure that there is words or phrases that you can use so that then when you're feeling uncomfortable during the scene, to say like, hey, we got to pause for a second, or no, we got to stop. And then also having the aftercare piece of, hey, like, how did that go for you? And it's kind of like a debrief. And then also having aftercare as a couple or partners, where you're kind of like getting back together and coming down from the adrenaline. Mm-hmm. And then also having your own aftercare to allow yourself to come back down.
I have a question about that. Some books that I've read suggest that you do this outside of the bedroom and outside of the experience. Do you also agree?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it should be a completely unrelated time where you sit down and address.
Right.
You're like, I've heard it referred to as a weather report, how you're feeling, both before and after.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then like the reason why people do, like, this is like stepping into the community and stepping into the scene. So it's like not just having hair pulling experiences while you're in the bedroom, or not just having choking experiences, or not just, you know, the stuff that can happen during sex. This is actually going into a scene. Like maybe there's some power dynamic stuff going on where there's a dominant or a submissive, or maybe there's some rope experiences going on where like you have to get tied up and in a intricate way. You know, there's a whole bunch of things.
I saw
like
that in the sex room.
Yeah, and then
The tie, is that what you're talking about?
yeah, and then maybe like there's some like toys, like there's an X type of thing where someone's strapped on that, you know, things like that. So like you're stepping into a scene rather than
We need
just
to get you
adding.
sponsorship.
I want that. I also saw that in sex room.
Yeah.
Yes, I want that.
Yeah. So like that's a little different than having like kinkier practices during an actual sex act, like pulling hair and things like that. So having these conversations outside of that can allow you to prepare for it, because then you're stepping into a role. like when you're going into a kinky scene like that, whether it be like a role play or the power dynamic thing that I have been saying, or stepping into an experience that requires some setup. So then like your mindset is in there and ready to go. And then you have that safety to explore whatever is going on in the scene. So.
Thank you for that. We have all the questions. None of the answers ourselves, clearly, which is why you're here. Can you give us examples of different types of kinks?
Yeah. So the most common that I've seen on TikTok recently is
On TikTok. Count on TikTok.
That's great.
is praise, or a praise kink. What they call it is when someone tells you that like you're doing a good job, or praising yourself and like explaining like you're beautiful and wonderful things.
Okay, but
I feel like how is that
different than
kink? How is that? Because I feel like during sex, that's like kind of like.
For her, it's like a
kink-
requirement, probably.
A kink is something that like
Am I doing a good job?
People need. Like it's kind of like it adds to the experience. So like the praise kink is something that maybe people like a lot more than just normal amounts of praise.
Okay, so it's
like extra.
and it's like a power dynamic thing too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
All
then
right.
like someone who is looking at you or doing something with you, they're saying you're doing such a good job. Like that then is like a power dynamic situation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the person giving the praise is the dominant.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Okay. I agree.
And
So would that technically be like kinky for the dominant person?
Yeah,
Like that's
it could
something that they get power out of giving the compliment,
It could be. Yeah.
the praise.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Okay.
And in my mind, I'm over here just being like, well, they're just communicating.
Right. They're right.
Some people also like being degraded or talked down to, like kind of like humiliation.
Not me.
Yeah. That's one I'll have to stay away from.
And that's more of like the.
I would cry.
You would cry, and I'd be like, you need to get out.
Yeah.
Some people like that, and it's okay to like whatever you want.
It is
Like,
okay.
Sure, sure. We're not judging.
No,
we're just saying
not.
for ourselves.
Personally.
Right. In my opinion.
In my opinion, I would not like to be degraded.
Yeah, and so like where that plays a role is another piece of power dynamic play.
Yeah, I
It's
can see
like
that for sure.
like someone is more submissive in receiving that, and then someone's more dominant in giving that. And then the reason why there's like aftercare and setup and all that stuff is to make sure that they feel safe throughout the experience, because sometimes it could be triggering to hear things like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So. And then there's people who have kinks that are into bondage, and bondage is anything that like you tie up, or handcuffs or things like that. And
I like a good tie up.
yeah, and it's
Over here, anyway, on this side. We like a good tie up.
let me
Devin, how about you?
Devin literally just keeps shrinking lower into his seat. Ashley, we're sorry. We know you have a date tonight on the day that we're recording this. Sorry about his potential weird mood when he shows up to take you.
Or
out.
he could be, he could show up extra horny.
And in that case, you're welcome.
Yeah. His face is so red.
And then there's other kinks, like people like to utilize different objects, like knife play is a little more extreme, or anything related to different body fluids, and like role play type kinks too, like teacher student, doctor patient, like things like that. And so it's a wide variety, and there are people like who have different tastes in the kink community, and like I don't think of one as more extreme than the other. I think it's more about like one can look potentially unsafe. Like if you're drawing blood or something like that, you want to have safe practices and things like that. So people who do that set everything up front and make sure that consent is always given throughout the entire scene. And some people actually go into contracts, like writing out what is good, what is not good, what our boundaries are, and then making sure that consent is given throughout the whole scene, and then aftercare. So
50 Shades of Grey.
yeah.
Did you see that movie?
So a lot of people,
Pieces.
yeah.
I
So
get that. I know
50
the
Shades
gist
of
of it.
Grey is the first like type of movie that people have seen or read. I think it was a book too, right?
Yes.
That introduced a lot of people to this world. And so most people have kinky fantasies. It's just that disconnect between having the fantasy and sharing it with your partner or actually implementing it in real life. There are fantasies, though, that are not really good at being implemented in real life, obviously, because like more dangerous situations are definitely something that people need to think about. But a lot of people feel nervous or fearful because kink does look a little bit different than what normal, quote unquote, normal looks like, and all of it is normal, you know. So
All of it is normal.
All of it is normal. Okay.
there are some like people who have come to me and are like, is this rare? Is this something? Like someone had said on the questions, is like tickling a rare
Oh, that's
one,
right. One of the
or
questions.
something like that. And you know, like just because it's rare doesn't mean that it's not okay. Like maybe you haven't heard about it before, or maybe you don't know because we don't talk about these things, right? Because society's pressure and messaging and all that good stuff that we shared a little bit last time. But if it's not hurting you or hurting someone else, and making sure that you're consenting and everyone's okay with the experience, then that's fine. You know, like it's okay to have a little bit more different types of interests. And if it does impact you in a negative way, like if you're obsessing about it and you feel shame, if it's getting in the way of work or any sort of community involvement, if it's ruining relationships or things like that, that's when you should go and see like a sex therapist to maybe uncover some of that shame, to release the shame, and to just, you know, continue on with what you like, because that's what gets people in the way is shame.
This might be a weird question, or I don't know if it's weird. I don't want to say dumb questions. I know there's no dumb questions, but when it comes to kinks, is it more people? I don't know if you know that. I don't know if it's like, is it people that just want to have experiences that aren't like really in a relationship, or is it? Do you find it's more like people who are in a relationship and like trust each other that want to explore?
It could be
more
anything.
kinks?
You know, like there are people who have kinks that explore it with other people, and there are people in relationships who explore kink together. And it's like something that people like and enjoy, and sometimes it's like a non-negotiable for someone. Like they need to have the kink in order to have good sex, or they would like it, and that if it's not there, then maybe they're gonna feel a little bit like disappointed or sad or something like that. And then there's other people who do that type of thing as a hobby. So like there's two pathways, I think. The orientation pathway where
Hobby,
it's like,
you know, on the weekends.
Hobby.
yeah, like a hobby or something
Special
fun.
kinky date night.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's something fun like that, or they're really oriented to it, and that's what they want in the bedroom or wherever in their life, and that's okay too.
Okay. Good to know. All right. Next question. Should we talk about the
milking
the prostate question?
Yeah, that was a very specific question.
That was very specific.
So this person asked about what, like, just discovering prostate milking and that they're obsessed with it. So
Can we talk about first what is it?
Yes. What is it?
And then we'll address the question.
Yeah. So prostate milking is a situation that
Poor Devin.
It's clearing my throat. Yeah. Sorry.
Devin's over here just uncomfortably clearing his throat. Okay.
So there's a technique. So let me back up. People who have penises and prostates have that type of experience with the prostate. So prostate has a bunch of nerve endings that allow for pleasure. And prostate milking is a technique where you would massage the prostate in a certain way in order to release fluid. And the prostate is actually a really great place for someone who has one to have orgasms. And a lot of people don't actually approach the prostate because it might feel a little scary, depending on their sexual orientation. And a lot of people don't know that the prostate is like a pleasure center for someone who has one.
Do you, in your work, find that straight men avoid it because it is not a straight thing?
Yeah, so like there's a lot of internalized homophobia. And just so everyone on the pod knows, like no matter what sex acts you do doesn't make you a certain sexual orientation.
Right.
Like your sex acts are just your sex acts and it's completely separate. So if you're a person who is a straight man who likes prostate play, you're still a straight man.
Yeah.
And if you're, you know, like if you're a gay man who likes prostate play, you're still a gay man. Or who doesn't like prostate play, you're still a gay man.
Right.
So it just
I was just trying to bring back the conversation that we had when we were off air, where there were a lot of like stereotypes thrown at different activities.
right. So like anything internal for a man playing with prostate is quote unquote gay. And there's a lot of that internalized homophobia around that. And what internalized homophobia is just kind of like that fear of being anything other than straight, because the straight conversation has been embedded in different religious organizations and society. And so that's more, the straight phenomenon is more of the norm. So if you touch anything that is outside of that, there's a lot of fear or shame because of that internalized messages. So, yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Okay, and so going back to milking.
Yeah.
It's called milking because the...
Fluid comes. Yeah.
Right, because there's fluid.
Yep. And there are people who love that experience and feel an insane amount of pleasure, and there are people who don't. So it just, you know, you got to play around with these things in a safe environment and in a safe way, and making sure that you give consent and receive consent the whole time. And if it feels uncomfortable, don't keep going.
Right. Did that answer the question then? What was the question?
I think she just was more maybe wanting advice
How to approach it?
on how to. Well, I
So the
think
milking question was just saying that they're obsessed with it.
okay.
Oh,
Like
so it was more of a comment.
A comment.
Right.
Yes,
Great.
comment. Okay.
And
But
they're
glad we talked about it because, well, we're all in sex education today.
Yes, we are. Yes, we
yeah.
are.
So like sex acts aren't necessarily kinky, but they can be. Mm-hmm. So, you know, like something like that is a little bit more out of the norm, quote unquote, because the norm in society is missionary, right? And missionary is where the there's a bottom and then there's a top and they're facing each other. And usually the missionary position is with a man and a woman. So anything outside of that is considered, quote unquote, outside the norm. But, you know, now people are having more conversations about different positions that are like more pleasurable for other people. And then there are certain sex acts within there that could be kinky, but aren't necessarily. So it feels kinky because it's not something that people talk about.
That's interesting that you say it's considered outside of the norm. Missionary. I'm like,
That's
really?
That's from religion, and
that is definitely, and we know that here sitting in this chair. My religious background that never talked about sex ever.
the history is like if you don't have sex, if you have sex outside of marriage and outside of missionary and outside of breeding, which is like reproducing and having children.
Oh, I didn't know the missionary thing was like a part of that too.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the only way.
That was the only way that you're supposed to have sex.
Yes.
Interesting.
But now, you know, like that conversation is you can do whatever you want when you want, and like it's combating and releasing that shame depending on how you grew up and what messages you had. But the societal norm back in the day was missionary man and woman sex to have kids.
babies.
To have babies.
Right.
Not for pleasure.
Yeah. And then speaking of having kids, there are people who have kinks that are related to breeding, which is reproduction, but they don't necessarily want to have kids. It's more about like the territory or the marking or feeling like they're theirs, depending on who's giving and receiving. And again, that's a power dynamic.
So is this then they're just simply talking about it?
You can talk about it, and then you can have sexual acts that like mimic that. So like how to make a baby other than like medicine. Then the way is a man has ejaculatory experience inside the vagina to then reproduce, right? So people mimic that, whether they're on like birth control or having some sort of conversation where they're tracking their fertility so that they don't get pregnant. And then during the scene, some people like to act it out and role play in that situation, but it's kind of like a power dynamic thing where people like to feel that they're someone's, and then people like to claim their person as theirs. So that's kind of like where that maybe can come from, but everybody's experience is different. And yeah, so I just wanted to bring that up as a kink that some people do have.
So interesting. I've never even heard of that.
No, but I think that there is so many.
There's a
kinks,
lot.
so many, so many.
Like I can't spew them out.
No, right? Yeah,
Like,
there's a lot.
Some people like to watch other people, and that's kinky. And some people like to, what else? Some people have like kinks with different types of objects. Like it's just, yeah, it's a vast variety of things. But, like I said at the beginning, there's like a central like power dynamic and play and exploration.
Okay. So another question that we got, I don't know if it's not really a question. The whole use it, is it true?
It was a question.
If you don't use it, you lose it.
Which, by the way, I asked the
person.
man.
Yes.
He's a man who asked that question, and he said, "You're so funny. I was quoting from a movie."
Get out of here.
I was like,
Get out.
Okay, so just for everybody's knowledge,
But we
some
should
people
address
might
it.
have questions.
Right.
But I think,
we should still answer the
we
question.
should still answer the question
Right.
because I was saying beforehand to Dr. Sam that I have heard about the women, and if you're not like orgasming all the time and stuff like that,
and you forget how to do it.
maybe you forget. I don't know what the right verbiage is of what I've heard. Not that you lose it, but you should be like at least like masturbating on if you're not like having. I guess if you're not having sex on a regular basis, say it's been like a year.
You don't lose anything.
Right. I don't think you lose
No.
anything either.
So like I think people feel fearful the longer that they are away from masturbation and sex. So like let's say they don't have sex for a year. They feel fearful because they haven't, and they're not sure how to approach the situation because it might feel awkward, or like they don't have their game on, or things like that. But you don't lose anything. And like even for people, I was thinking about this question, like if you don't use it, you lose it. Like I was thinking about people who have disabilities or paralysis or spinal cord injury, and people who are older, like when like elderly, where your body's changing and like you lose some of the sex drive, or you lose some of lubrication and things like that. While your body's changing or stops working in certain ways, you don't lose the ability to have sex. You just have to navigate it a little bit differently.
Okay.
Yeah. So like if someone is like elderly and has mobility issues, there's props that you can get, like a special chair or a swing that you can sit in and make it more comfortable. If you lose the ability to have erections, you can do either like medical intervention like Viagra, or you can do like mental health intervention, or buying like a cock ring and a penis pump and working with those to then be able to have an erection. If you're someone who can't get one or have ejaculatory experiences because of a disability, you can do different types of things like the prostate play, or like external play, or feeling pleasure in different areas. Those areas are called erogenous zones, where on our body there's different levels of pleasure where you would feel them that isn't just the genital area. So like you don't lose it, you just have to navigate it differently.
Okay. can we talk about the erogenous zones?
Yes.
Yeah. So, obviously the genital area has the highest nerve endings, no matter if you have a penis or a vulva. And that's going to be like your number one place. But then like other people have pleasure centers on their chest or on their neck or on their ears, in their hair, like on their arms. Some people say that their armpits feel really good. So in order to explore erogenous zones, you can either do it on your own or with your partner and just sit and touch each other with different levels of pressure, like soft or hard, with different textures, like maybe with like a feather or scratching or something like that, and different places. And then you would feel into what feels the best and then translate it into your other experiences. So, if I personally like exploring things on my own and then having the conversation with my partner or whoever I was having sex with. I have sex with my partner. And then I would translate it to having that conversation. Because then, like, I feel confident in what feels good. And then I know it's going to feel different with someone else.
Right. Cool. Thank you for that.
Might feel a little more intense with a partner, but...
Do you think it always feels better, or that's not guaranteed?
Not guaranteed.
Right. Okay.
Feels different.
Right.
And, like, maybe playing on your own is way better than playing with a partner. It just depends on the person, and, like, how they're feeling about the experience also matters. So, like, if you're going into an experience feeling nervous or anxious, then that definitely plays a role in how, like, it will feel.
Before we started recording, we got on the topic of porn, the porn industry a little bit, and we were like, stop talking because we need to talk about this on the podcast. And it was kind of our general consensus after a very brief chat that the porn industry is ruining everything. So,
and people are going to be, even just saying that, I'm sure some people listening to the podcast are going to be
upset
about that.
So I feel like the porn industry is entertainment.
Yeah.
So, like, everybody is doing it for their own benefit, for entertaining other people. And, like, while there's good places to watch porn, like ethical porn is a place where people get treated correctly and there's not necessarily any sort of issues like trafficking or anything like that, abuse or drugs. You see, like, the real thing, like, without any prosthetics or without any sort of syringes popping out fluids or anything like that. But there is a fine line between, like, what is okay and what can ruin things, you know? So, like, if someone's watching porn consistently, and, like, you can fall into addiction because of the dopamine levels that porn, you know.
So that is true. I believe that very much so. But I've heard some people go, "Oh, porn can't be an addiction."
Oh, anything can be an addiction.
Yeah.
It's the definition of addiction is a behavior that is done obsessively and out of control, no matter what. Like, they don't necessarily care about the consequences. It's seeking out the high and the dopamine, and, like, you need more of it over time to get the high, and that's where the addiction comes in. And it's a slippery slope sometimes. But there are places that are really good to watch those things, and there are, like, certain experiences where people might just watch it every so often, and that's totally healthy. It's when it gets in the way of, like, your work or anything, like I had said earlier, about negatively impacting yourself or your relationship and hurting someone else or hurting yourself. That's where it can maybe have difficulty. But I do have clients who have had issues with the addiction piece, and it's because, like, it's this fantasy world that is actually happening in real life, on the TV or the computer or something like that. So, like, what I would help them with is stepping back from it for a little bit and then re-engaging in real life exploration, like masturbation or things like that, to then retrain the brain to not release as much dopamine. And then if they can go back and watch it every so often, then that's cool too. But anything can be an addiction. shopping, eating,
Right.
sex, alcohol, drugs. Like, it's not just drugs and alcohol, it's anything.
Sure. And I think that is the root of, where that statement comes from, that porn's ruining sex. But I think it is, we talked about this being tied into an expectation.
Yeah. And then that's where a lot of people learn how to have sex.
Yes.
Like, before all of these
And I mean,
resources
these days, kids with phones, it's like
They have access to
they
everything.
have access to everything, and then
Right.
this is how they're learning what sex is supposed to be.
Oh yeah, and like before all of these resources came out, like experts talking and standing up for sexual health and having these conversations and normalizing some of this stuff, that's all you had was Pornhub or RedTube and all of that stuff. And then like even before that, you had the magazines and things like that. I wasn't born during the times of the magazines. I was born during the time where the internet was starting to be faster and and so and then like people look for that to learn how to like what the mechanical is. And so like if we start just having conversations about what the mechanical is, then you can build off of that. Rather than seeing something that looks painful or isn't necessarily a realistic situation.
So you would say if people are interested in porn, to point them towards ethical porn, and they can just like Google
totally.
that?
I would do that. Yeah.
Okay.
But then that's because I have that compass of like understanding that some of the videos on like those public website might not be like consented to. There might be abuse situations.
Right.
There might be trafficking, and I just don't know. So ethical porn is this like newer conversation about, hey, we are doing this right. Our actors and actresses and people who are on the scene are consenting, and it's a more realistic approach. And then also like OnlyFans and people who are in the sex work industry have their pages and are consenting. So that's why I really like that platform for those people, so that then they could do whatever they want and they're consenting and it's fun and good for them.
Good for a lot of them. They're making
Yeah, they
a
are.
lot of money.
Oh yeah. And the sex work industry is huge. And I like really hate that people hate on it, because like there are people who need it.
Yeah.
It's just like any other industry. But the taboo of sexuality, like we've been talking about since day one on this podcast,
Right.
makes it a little hard. But there was a question I wanted to talk about, was they're discovering a kink and they don't know how to tell someone.
Yeah.
So going back to the questions, so doesn't matter what kink it is, how to have the conversation can vary, right? Depends on your confidence level. So my first thing is to make sure that you know what you're going to say. So either writing it down or thinking about it for a little while and getting your energy behind it. Because like if you're feeling like not so confident in yourself and feeling like a little wobbly per se, then it's not going to go well. But if you approach the situation in a confident manner and know exactly what you're going to say and how you're going to approach it, then nothing can turn you down. Like if they're rejecting you, that doesn't matter, because you are confident in who you are. So then you can practice that like however you want. You can write a letter, you can share it in the mirror to yourself and just be ready for it. And then you can schedule a conversation so that then it's not necessarily all left field. And I talked about this a little bit last time about front loading, which is saying to a person up front, like essentially, hey, I want to talk to you about our sex life, or hey, I want to talk to you about a kink that I'm exploring, or hey, I want to talk to you about our kids, or literally anything. Can we schedule a time to talk about it? And then that prepares you to be ready, and it prepares them to not feel so left field from that, because a lot of times sex conversations come from left field
Right.
and come from a buildup of frustration or overwhelm or anxiety. And that's why people like get really turned off by having conversations about sex, is because it's like a tornado coming in and being
Sure.
like, whoa, wait, where did that come from?
Yeah, what are we talking about?
So then with that, how do you suggest approaching a conversation with your partner so your partner doesn't think that they're either not, they shouldn't feel that they're doing something wrong,
Yeah.
or they're not doing enough, or that they're like,
Right. So then you would say
Inefficient.
that, like, this isn't
Right.
necessarily, it depends on the sex talk, but like, this isn't about like judging each other, but it's about enhancing our intimacy. And like, you know, you don't say like the things of like, you're not doing enough, or I don't feel good. You don't say those things. But you say
that
like,
feels obvious.
Yes, yes.
But
there are a lot of
yeah.
things that people say that are not obvious.
Right. So then you would say something like, I'm noticing that, I don't know, I'm noticing that I'm not feeling good in our sex life or something like that. And can we talk about it? But to approach the kink conversation, you would kind of approach it from an education standpoint first, like, because you might not know if they know what the kink is. So, you know, like, you can share with them either a snippet of a book or a podcast or like some sort of thing to give them the education of what it is, and then asking them, is that something that they're cool with? And then that doesn't necessarily put you in the picture, but it allows for like you to find out and test the waters about how they feel about it before you go in and have the conversation. So then if like the person's like, ooh, I like that, then you can say, hey, like, I've been exploring and I'm curious to try this. So can we set up a scene, or can we set something up where we try this next time, or approaching it in a more direct way? Because like, you want to get all of the direct stuff out, and it lays the foundation for you to then play during your sex time or during your scene time, depending on if you're having sex or not. And then that's like balancing the doing and like setting everything up so that then you have more room to have fun. Like, get it all out of the way first.
Yeah,
Okay,
makes sense.
love that. And you keep referring to this as a scene. Where does
Yes.
this term come from? I mean, I love it because I
know.
like it's like Hollywood.
Right, that's what I feel like,
That's
too.
what
Like,
they say in kinky practices. I'm not necessarily sure where it came from, but that's always been the term, because you're
Okay.
setting up a play scene, and they call it play, and
I love it.
And
And scene.
And
yeah.
end scene.
And then there was another question about like squirting for women,
Oh,
and I just
do
wanted
all
to answer
women
that.
squirt?
Right.
So-
question. Can all women squirt?
So the can, it's always a possibility, but it's really dependent on the woman and how they feel, because it's a really strange phenomenon, because experts don't know what exactly the fluid is, because it comes from, like, there might be a little pee in there, or there might not be a little pee in there, and then like having to relax yourself all the way to that point can be a little challenging. So, you know, the can is always there and the possibility is always there. It's just like making sure that you're taking care of your partner, who's the woman, and making sure that they feel relaxed and feel good and feel safe in order to try to explore those parts internally that allow for that.
And do you know if it's more kinky for the woman or for the man, or does it?
I think it's either. I think like there are a lot of men that I've heard who like that.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of women
Now, does
out there
that
who
come
like that.
from the porn thing too? I feel
It
like
could.
it's like I feel like it's a porn thing. Like,
Definitely.
like, oh, every woman just does this when they have sex. Like, it's like a, you know what I mean? That's where I feel like it's come from.
So when I was exploring my sexuality growing up, that was a thing that a lot of, because I was having sex with men, and that was a lot of things that men were like, ooh, like, can you squirt? And that was like high school, early college, right? And like, I was like, where did you like figure that out? Because I don't know. And then they were like, oh, it's on a porn video.
Yeah.
Of course.
And so that was my experience. So I'm like, well, I'm not sure. So, but I never felt safe enough to relax to that point, because then at that point, I didn't know what an orgasm was and like how it functions as a woman and in my body. And I didn't learn until I was like 21 interning at a sex toy shop. They gave me a sex toy to try and then come back and be like, oh, that's what it is.
Got it.
Well, that's also pretty prevalent, isn't it? With sex in general, women's sexual health is like put on the back burner because for so long women were almost like quote used as this like tool for, sorry to be like so direct, but for like men to
And then it's like you don't focus on the pleasure because you're reproducing or trying to so that's another societal message that women are starting to come out with of like, no, we feel intense pleasure and here's where the clitoris is.
get yourself a Google.
Yeah.
We could talk
Do you need
about
a map?
If you need a map, there are maps on Google.
Definitely.
It's, with one click of a button, you can find out where is the clit.
Right.
And it's sad, and like we can have a whole conversation about sexual health.
We should on the next episode.
Yeah.
For our series.
And then like stepping into your wholeness is including sex and sexuality.
Are toys considered kink or not really?
There are some
norm?
toys and tools that people use in the kinky space. But like dildos and vibrators and things like that are not necessarily used in the kink space, but could be. But there's like floggers or paddles to play with sensations. There's feathers you can play with sensations with. Handcuffs and rope is also toys that you can use. There's like machines, like sex machines. Like there's a penis looking thing and it like does it for you, which is really cool.
So this is just like to use by yourself or with a
You
partner?
could,
Either.
either.
Doesn't matter. Okay.
Yeah, some
I've
people
seen the
like
butts.
to watch.
Poor Devin.
I've seen the butts.
They have butts.
Oh yeah, and there's
Like
like
actual.
They're butts that move on a machine.
No, but they're like butts that you can
and sex
have sex
toy-
with.
like dolls.
Just a butt.
Okay.
There's
cool.
dolls
Yes.
too that people have sex with, which is cool. And then there's what else? I'm trying to think of the local sex store that's near my house. But there's so many things, and you can make it
I'm like,
kinky
what
or
kind
you
of
can.
doll? I got stuck on the doll.
Her face, but that's why I started laughing too. But when you were like, so that's cool. Like totally.
Yeah, that's cool.
What encompasses kink is that play and that power dynamic and sensation play, like hitting or scratching or soft sensations. And, like you can make something kinky. You can also not make something kinky. Mm-hmm. But there's like a general consensus of what kink is. And then from there, it can expand or not.
Mm-hmm. And you had also told us about like there could be blood.
Yeah, or like there's like electric play too, and
Like you get electrocuted?
kind of.
Okay.
It's another
Okay, she
form,
says.
another
Well, that-
form of sensation.
Now, does that fall into like what categorizes like BDSM?
So BDSM stands for bondage, dominant or discipline. S is submissive or what's the other word? Sensation or sadomasochism. That's what it is. And so the
M?
the sadist masochism.
Masochism.
Oh, okay.
So like that encompasses sensation play and also encompasses the power dynamic piece. So like BDSM is that acronym that includes all of those things, and again kinky, they kind of are interchangeable. When I first learned about kinky things, it was through the BDSM acronym, but then I think the community has taken this term kinky and made it something that is more community based. And then like BDSM acronym stands for the things that could be included in that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about swingers? Are they considered kinky just because you're a swinger?
I literally was just thinking about
Not
that.
Oh, really?
necessarily.
Yeah.
So there's different kinds of sex out there. Swinging is where you swap partners. And that's not necessarily kinky, but it can be. There's also people who are into that, and a community of people who are into that. And then there's people who are into ethical non-monogamy, which is where they have a partner, and then in certain times they go outside of their primary relationship. It's all consenting.
So is that like open relation? Would you consider
yeah,
that's open
so
relationship?
like there's that ethical non-monogamy, and then the umbrella underneath that there's open relationships, casual dating, polyamory, which is a dating and having romantic and sexual relationships with multiple people. Swinging is under there, things like that. But it's the relationship structure, not necessarily the kink.
Okay. Thank you.
It's a lot to think about.
Oh, totally. We could do a whole episode on like relationship structures too, because
Yeah.
like there's so many. Like
I feel like nowadays, for sure.
There's so many.
there's
many.
always been so many. It's just like the societal norm is the monogamous, like man, woman, monogamous, missionary, kids.
Do you believe that we're made to be? I know this is a big debate. Do you think we're made to be monogamous or not really?
I think that there is benefits to all of them, and I think that people are oriented to certain types. So like evolutionarily, like biologically, no, because man can produce sperm up until they die, and then women only produces eggs up until a certain point. And so like to breed or like keep our species alive, that's what they would do, is like go around and find people who were best fit, meaning like their genetics are good and their health is good and they look good and all that stuff. That's evolutionary psychology. But I think that there's certain orientations that people take and they feel more comfortable around. And like talking about monogamy is the norm, and people feel like there are people in monogamous relationships who feel awkward or off for some reason and they're not sure why. And then when I would talk with them about that and like orientation, meaning like you're just oriented to something, you just like vanilla ice cream just because, you know, or you like mint chocolate chip just because, there's no reason. It's just your pattern. Then I would ask them about like their belief systems around certain relationships, and then that's where it would be like, oh no, not necessarily monogamy is the thing that feels right for me. So it's like sexual orientation too, like you're kind of like oriented to a certain pattern or a certain person, and then we have our relationship orientation. But people force themselves into monogamy because that's the standard. And, you know, like it depends on how you grew up. Like if you grew up in a really strict home, that was the only thing, right? Or not having sex before marriage and things like that. But now, like I said at the beginning of the episode, people are having more conversations about what is actually out there and what the truth actually is
Yeah.
versus just having to force yourself into something that it doesn't feel good.
Right. Yeah, I was talking to a friend the other day and she said, oh, my primary. And I'm like, okay, well, if you have a primary, that infers you have a secondary.
Right.
So I'm just learning all the terms.
Oh, yeah. We could do a whole episode on that. But some people have a structure where there's a primary couple, and then outside of that is dependent on what they're doing. Like if they're polyamorous, then they're seeking out romantic relationships, maybe outside of the primary relationship. It's like coming home to the same person and then going out to other people. And then if it's like an open relationship or something like that, they have their primary partner and then they go out sexually, casually, or
And I would
whatever.
assume you would have to have like so much trust with, and not.
Oh
be-
yeah, communication.
Oh my gosh.
Trust.
I
And
couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I'm too anxious.
That's okay.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
You're right.
And you know, that's again orientation.
Yeah.
And that's also like knowing what you want and then communicating that.
Right. And so like I feel like kinky people and people who are in non-traditional relationships have the communication thing down. Like
You would have to.
you have it up front, like you're not afraid to share how you're feeling or what you want, and you're comfortable and consenting, and then people feel awkward about that because, again, the norm was monogamy or is monogamy.
Sure.
But the norm is really what you feel good with. That's what normal is.
I like that.
Let's normalize feeling good.
Yeah, normalize feeling good.
Yeah.
So we can't live a life without feeling good or having pleasure, and most people do have sex, and we should normalize that.
Yes. Let's normalize having sex.
Right. And enjoying it.
Right.
Yeah.
And enjoying it.
Right.
Both partners enjoying it.
Right.
Absolutely.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
We have a few minutes left. Do we have
Is there any other questions?
Yeah, let's see if there's any other questions.
So there wasn't any other kinky questions, but I saw a question about why am I horny all the time? It doesn't stop and it hurts.
Oh.
It hurts being horny or it hurts physically?
It probably is physical. So there is like that sensation where, so no matter what gender you are, this is what happens. So the brain sends a message that says like, I'm horny or whatever. And then that message gets sent down to the genitals, and that's where the blood flow comes through. And it like engorges the genitals, like whether you have an erection from the blood flow going into the penis, or you have an engorgement of blood in the vulva area where the clitoris is and inside in the vaginal canal. And also like the vaginal fluid stuff. So if you are sitting with that and not having that release, it could really, really hurt. There are people out there who have a physical disorder called persistent genital arousal disorder, where
That would be terrible.
yeah, so it's rare, but it happens.
But that's probably so much harder for people with penises because you can't hide it.
Yeah. It's hard for everyone because it's uncomfortable
Sure.
and painful. And so like if you are having that experience, I would seek out a doctor, like either a urologist or a gynecologist, and talk to them about that. But if it's because you're not like, you're sitting with yourself and you're like hurting because you're not releasing, start trying to release that, if you're in the proper area, like masturbation or having sex with your partner, depending on what it is. But if it's still happening, that's probably a manifestation of something else. Mm-hmm. So there are instances where people have had sexual trauma that are hypersexual. And so hypersexual meaning like sex all the time and things like that. So you want to like dig into like what it is mentally, so that then you can feel better either about your sexuality or fixing the issue if it hurts, because that's not necessarily the norm.
Right.
Yeah.
Like if anyone's feeling any pain, that's not the norm.
Okay.
Thank you for answering that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for answering all of them.
And then
Oh,
asking
kinky
yourself
topic.
if you're getting your needs met.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And
That's
if
a
you're
huge
not,
one.
then that's a conversation to have if you're in a relationship. But if you're not in a relationship, then how can you meet those needs on your own, or like exploring with like casual dating or whatever you feel like doing?
We're going to ask our listeners and viewers what subject matter we should
Do next.
do next with you specifically.
Yes.
But after this conversation today, does any topic pop up in your mind that might be interesting for our next series?
I like all of it.
Okay.
Great.
So then we will ask
Yeah.
So all things sex.
audience we'll throw up a couple topics.
Yeah.
Do a poll.
I mean, relationships, sexual health, like the health side of it. What else? Porn, communication, really anything.
It would be really neat if we could figure out a way to take some live questions. Would be
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, that would be.
Oh, that would
Would
be.
you be open to that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because maybe we can schedule it where Jalen's available, and so she can be on our account, on our Instagram account.
Yeah.
And then,
Like monitoring.
yes, and then asking questions in real time.
Real time.
Which would be fun.
That would be cool.
That'd be great.
Yes, you can throw your questions to Dr. Sam in real time,
Yes.
and she's still able to handle them. She doesn't need them in advance.
Yes.
Which is great.
Which
Thank
is
you.
Amazing.
Yeah, this is great.
Yes.
We answered all the questions from our viewers today.
Yep.
It's a beautiful, we're sitting here in Boca Raton Flamingo House. It's
Gorgeous.
a beautiful, gorgeous Saturday. So
Yes.
we're going to go outside and enjoy that.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking
Thank you
time
so
out of your
much.
day
Absolutely.
to talk to us about kink.
Yes, it was very educational.
Yes.
Devin, are you educated?